So, without any further ado, for our debate, how do we develop Lewes, building the homes we need while keeping the town we love? Please give a very warm welcome to your chair for this evening, Mr. David Dimbleby.
I'll lift this off for a moment. Thank you very much indeed. At the BBC, we always say, when an event's being filmed, if you're sitting next to somebody you don't think you should be sitting next to, this is your chance to move. It's a great privilege and honor to be asked to chair this debate tonight. Though whether you call it a debate, I'm not sure, because as you will know, some of the components of debate are missing. The idea of a debate is that you have people from all sides of an argument who come and fight their corner and speak their minds. And notably absent are two of the principal participants in this whole discussion about the future of Lewes, despite countless attempts by the organizers to persuade members of Lewes District Council who are involved in planning, of the Cabinet who are involved in planning, despite attempts to persuade the developers who are involved, notably Santon, in the most courteous and consistently courteous manner, that it might be in the interests of the town of Lewes and of their proposals that they come here and simply put their case. They have, for one reason or another, not become available. And it's not right to speculate on why. There could be a number of reasons. One's tempted to think that there's an element of the arrogance of power and authority. But it may be that they feel perhaps they have not quite got it right and don't know how to get off the hook. Those of you who conspiracy theorists may think that there's some sort of deal being done that they can't unstitch. But for whatever reason, it doesn't say much for the theory of localism, which is now meant to be the watchword for development, that they're not here. So enough said about that. You're here. Thank you. We do, however, have, and I'm very glad about this, the chair of Lewes District Council, who has courageously agreed to come here tonight to speak, but I'll introduce her in a moment. So let me begin by introducing you to our panel and just explaining how we will take this. We've got a number of questions that have been sent in advance, and we're grateful for those. But what I want to do is to try and engage as many of you as possible during the answers, so that everybody gets at least a chance to speak their mind. And we have two microphones, and if when you want to speak, you could put your hand up, the people with the microphones will try and get to you. And that way I hope we can make it a fairly wide debate. Now, we've got 6 people on the panel. Keith Taylor, by the way, is not able to come, but you may have seen he was originally put on the list, but he's not here tonight because he's not well. First of all, from Action in Rural Sussex, of which he's the chief executive, helps rural communities decide how to prepare their neighbourhood plans and the rest of it, and was an original member of the South Downs National Park Authority. Would you welcome Jeremy Leggett? Sitting next to him, an honorary professor at the research unit at Sussex University, involved as an emeritus professor at the Institute of Development Studies at the Open University, somebody who's had a long and distinguished career in issues of globalization, and since his retirement has been focusing here on the green economy, and in particular on urban regeneration in New Haven and Lewes. Professor Rafi Klipinski. And now somebody who I'm sure you will all know, since Lewes is a small town, and she's clearly been prominent in arguments about things in this town for a long time. She's the chair of the tenants of Lewes District. She describes herself as a lifetime council tenant, passionate about issues involved around social housing, and recipient of the Lewes Civic Award for services to the community. Debbie Twitchen. And sitting on my immediate left, an architect, director of Conran and Partners, who's not actually involved in the Phoenix site, but is involved in the design work for the portfolio of the 49 houses that are being built, works in housing design, both one-off houses, large-scale regeneration, is involved in the attempt to save Saltdean as well. Anyway, a distinguished architect, born in Lewes, went to University College London, but knows Lewes like the back of his hand. Paul Zara. And then one of the founding directors of Lewes Phoenix Rising, the community development proposals for North Street, a commercial planning consultant, worked for NHS trusts, and has worked on new communities in southwest London, but has been involved in this for the last 18 months. Andrew Simpson. And finally, sitting on the end there, the chair of Lewes District Council. She's an independent. As she will explain when she answers her first question, she's been under considerable pressure not to come here tonight, but has courageously decided that she should be here to take part and speak her mind. Ruth O'Keefe. Right, well, let's get started. We'll take a question from Ian McKay, please, first of all. Ian McKay.
My question to the panel is, how do we stop Lewes turning into a commuter-based dormitory town?
How do we stop Lewes turning into a commuter-based dormitory town? Who'd like to start on that? Paul, you start.
And I have seen Lewes change, and it is partly a commuter town already. I've seen the value of the houses shoot up. It's really very difficult. I was born and brought up here. I now live over in Brighton, and the same thing's happening there. Any developments that happen anywhere near the stations, the values of the properties are very high. So I think what you have to do is make sure you can build enough affordable housing and enough housing at sensible distance away from the station in order to kind of try and create more of a balance. But it's really difficult because so many people want to live in Lewes.
Debbie.
I'd like to start by saying that there are only 1,091 council properties left now in this town. This is clearly not good for social housing. We need more social housing. When we have more social housing, it's just sensible, because private rents are high and they're going up and up all the time. They're pushing local people out. They can't afford to live here. It's that simple, really.
Okay. Jeremy Leggett.
Thank you. I think it's a good question, and looking back over what's happened over the last 10 years or so, it's the right question. But I sense that what's really important is, in looking forward for Lewes, we try to solve tomorrow's problems rather than yesterday's problems. I don't think any part of the South East can avoid the ripple effect from London's house prices, bar anywhere. And Lewes is not going to escape from that. But on the other hand, there are other forces moving in the other direction. The very rapid rise in home working, the very rapid rise in self-employment. There are other forces going in the other direction that, if our development for the future is sympathetic to that, we can counter it in imaginative ways by solving tomorrow's problems with tomorrow's solutions and not worrying quite so much about the problems that we have arising from our proximity to London looking backwards.
Okay. Andrew Simpson.
My great planning guru, a woman called Jane Jacobs, talks about the importance of diversity in good places. One of the joys of Lewes is that we have a very diverse community. Yes, there is increasingly a sense of this being a commuter town, but the way that we resist Lewes turning into the kind of clone town that we can see elsewhere in Sussex and beyond because of the rising house prices is as follows. First, we need to make sure that we continue to provide homes that are affordable to local people on local wages, and that means 40% of market rent, which is social rent, which the local authority should be able to promote with a sensible housing strategy, which sadly it doesn't have at the moment.
What is the ratio at the moment that they're aiming at?
The last housing needs survey published by Lewes District Council showed that they expect, and the current trend is that what were socially rented homes, when they changed tenancies, are now being rented at 80 to 90% of market rent, which is simply not affordable. And the local authority can do something about that through judicious planning of the provision of affordable homes. The second point, David, I'd like to make is about places for people to work. Again, at the moment in this town, we have a wonderful diverse range of places for people to work and conduct their businesses, people who have lived and worked in Lewes for many years. Some of those places are provided at affordable rents, around about £10 a square foot or even less. And the purpose of those places is to provide workspaces where you can start your business, make it grow, employ local people, and create, again, that thriving, wonderful town, which is what we all benefit from living in at the moment. And there is no reason on earth why we cannot still provide those sorts of workspaces. No doubt we'll come on to exactly how you do that later. But I think if you have those two strategies, you will stop the town becoming what it could do, which would be ending up as if you like, a middle-class enclave of wealthy people who can afford to spend £1 million plus on a 3-bedroom house, or can afford to rent a 2-bed flat for £1,000 a month. That is not what we want in this town, and it is possible to do that if the District Council and the other authorities make that strategic decision.
Okay.
The Great Depression of the 1930s was solved by the construction globally of a system which we call mass production. We built larger and larger factories, we built longer and longer infrastructure, roads, motorways, trains, planes, boats, and we gradually divorced production from consumption and production from living. And that worked very well. Many people in the world have gained from it, including in the developing world. I'm a developing economist. But it's a system in crisis now. It's in crisis because the inequalities which come from this system no longer make it sustainable. Economically, in many respects, it doesn't work, and some production is coming back to the place of consumption, and it's environmentally disastrous. So we have to think to the future, which is Jeremy's point, and ask ourselves the question, How do we position Lewes not into the 20th century, but into the 21st century? That's the why. The how point is that we have to bring living and working closer together. And the problem in turning Lewes into a commuter town is all we do is we reinforce an old system which frankly is running into the ground and no longer works. It's a story in New Haven as well, not just a place to live in, but also a place to work in. And later on perhaps I'll have some suggestions about that.
I want now to call on Ruth O'Keefe, and I want to just ask her to explain this rather complex political dilemma which she finds herself in, but then put to her the question of how you stop Lewes turning into a commuter-based dormitory town. Then I'm going to take questions from the floor, so if you want to raise a question about this, stick your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you. Ruth.
It's usually very easy for me to know what to say because I just say what I feel and what I think. That's the great thing about being an independent. However, I had an email. I had several emails, but this was the one that was the key one. It says that they could see from the advertisement I would be attending this as an independent town, district and county councillor, and that was my intention. But you are also the chair of the district and you will be perceived as such. The difficulty here is that it's a key part of the chair's role to act as an ambassador for the district council. I cannot know what you will be asked or what you will want to say, but I need to point out it would be embarrassing for the district council administration and incompatible with your role as chair if you stand on a public platform where you are seen to be opposing decisions taken by the administration and their aspirations for North Street and or the property portfolio project. The chair of the council, they reminded me from the civic handbook, this is where my salvation came from, has a key role in acting as an ambassador. There will be occasions when the chair will wish to promote the philosophies and policies of council, as well as its achievements and aspirations, and this can be entirely appropriate. However, in so doing, the chair must avoid breaching the role of the leader of the council as a principal political spokesperson. Sadly, you will notice the leader of the council is not here. The chair must not make party political points, concentrating on promoting philosophies approved by the council or philosophies with which the council can associate. And I think at that point they thought I would give up and go home. What I actually said was, the core strategy and various other plans we have state things like community facilities are a key factor in the development of sustainable communities, and the views and opinions expressed by individuals and organisations that have an interest in the area are fundamental to the plan's content. So it's going to be a tricky one, but I'm going to attempt to answer every question simply by quoting the core strategy. I will then leave it up to you to decide whether the council is following that strategy or not. I couldn't possibly comment. I've just explained why.
All right.
So,
So, in that context, thank you very much for that. The question about whether Lewes can avoid turning Lewes into a commuter town. What does the strategy say?
it says that in Lewes, appropriate new housing will be developed that's contributed to meeting the significant housing needs and changes to the demographic profile of the population. The provision of appropriate affordable housing in appropriate locations will have enabled those who wish to live in the district to do so. It also says community facilities are a key factor in the development of sustainable communities. A community centre can host residents' meeting, preschool groups, adult education classes, etc., and the provision of these facilities at a local level increases accessibility for residents, raises the quality of their life through creating community cohesion, reduces isolation, and there is a need for new and improved community facilities which can be identified from neighbourhood and parish plans and audits of existing facilities or consultation with community groups. And throughout the preparation of the core strategy and its implementation to ensure provision for local residents, the views and opinions expressed by those individuals and organisations that have an interest in the area are fundamental to the plans.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruth. Yes, sir. Can you say your name first? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Una and I'm a woman.
Yes, thank you. It's a mistake I frequently make, and I apologise.
It's a pleasure to be embracing the androgyny. I wanted to address the question and maybe ask something, and just offer something as well, in the sense that I immigrated to Australia 10 years ago, but I actually care so passionately about Lewes and the unique diversity that is here that I flew back on one-way ticket and left the dolphins and whales behind to be here at this time. I'm one of the artists that's part of the Zoo Studios community who reside on the Phoenix estate. And anyone who's not aware of Zoo Studios, I would warmly encourage you to come along, have a cup of tea and check us out. It's an amazing space of incredible diversity. Head props builders for incredible spaces like the Olympics and theatre and festivals reside there. And we all kind of create a really beautiful, I guess you'd say, alternative space. So addressing the question of how to prevent Lewes from becoming a commuter town, if that is indeed what the majority of people want, I would say one of the voices I just wanted to add to the mix is to really celebrate the extraordinarily potent, creative force that's here already on that industrial estate, and really look at what is working beautifully there that can be amplified, as well as how we can integrate with, like you say, a kind of unavoidable commuter kind of aspect. Because I do know that from having friends in finance and banking and all those kind of, I guess, commuter-esque professions, they are starved for creativity, fun, light-heartedness, all those things that don't necessarily come along.
I don't want to stop you in full flow, but is your point that not sufficient recognition is being given to that, to the artistic endeavour in Lewes? Is that what you're saying?
It constantly surprises me that I walk around the town and people are not aware that it's there.
I see.
And there's a warm invitation for those worlds to meet each other. And when they do, beautiful things happen. Resources and talent come together and create even more magic. Okay. So that's maybe one solution as well.
Let me put that to the panel then, that people just don't know what goes on in this town. Is that true?
I think Lewes has a very strong artistic community. I think people know about that. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is actually housing need. How do we get the houses we need in this town?
You want to come on that?
I think we've got an extraordinarily vibrant creative culture in Lewes. I think the public face of that is Glyndebourne and the literary side and the musical side of Lewes, but there's this wonderful counterculture which is a wellspring of creativity, which is absolutely staggering, and which has enormous potential for reinforcing the diversity, but also employment opportunities in Lewes and getting to young people. And I think the worrying thing about the Santon proposal is that it just speaks completely away from that agenda. If it addresses the creative sector at all, which it barely does, it addresses the formal literary sector.
Those of you who have children whose children use the skate park or who go to dance academy, or those of you who know the community kitchen, or those of you who use the dance academy and Starfish, know what goes on down on that estate. Those are the creative people that provide a huge resource for this town and for the young people here. Those of you who have your car serviced at North Street Garage, those of you who use the carpenters down on that estate, these are all the people who service this town. We require a place like that so that we don't have to go miles to get the sorts of services that the town benefits from, and people do know what goes on the estate. And I think that I absolutely share your view that people should go down there and participate in some of the artistic activities that go on there. But don't forget that there are 450 jobs on the Phoenix estate, as Rafi has just alluded to, that are valuable contributors to the economy and to the social fabric of this town, and we cannot afford to lose them.
My question is, can each of the panel state their definition of affordable, and who do they envision moving into these affordable homes?
So what is affordable home, an affordable home, and who will move into it? Debbie, why don't you start on that?
Okay. Can I just start by giving you some figures here? Figures for property rental prices per week in this town currently are: market, one bedroom, £190, 80%, £154, and social rent, £78.28. Two bedroom, 233, 80%, £184.70, and social rent, £91.66. That is a massive difference. Affordable housing, so-called, at 80% rent is not affordable for the majority of people who are on a normal wage in this town. It is ludicrous to think otherwise. That's all I have to say.
I think I don't want to answer the question directly, so forgive me for that, but I will answer it in a way that I hope is helpful. I don't think there is any question from our perspective working with towns and villages across all of Sussex on affordable housing for the best part of the last 20-25 years. There is no question that as of now in 2015, the housing and planning system, if one can call it that, the collection of policies and ways in which housing is provided, is fundamentally broken. I don't think anybody on either the right or the left of politics would disagree that it is fundamentally broken, particularly in the southeast, where market prices are so dramatically out of kilter with local wages, especially in the rural economy, but also in the kind of economy that we're talking about here that's going on down at the Phoenix. Now, the fact that both sides of the political spectrum understand that that entire process and set of policies is broken doesn't mean that they are able to agree on how to fix it. And over the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen the planning system flip-flopping in one direction or another, trying to find some way, either through planning allocations, through targets, through incentives, to try to find a way in which we can get the houses built at the price that people can afford in the local economy. And we are simply not there. There are not the houses being built, and those that are being built are not then able to be let at rentable prices. So a registered social landlord is having, by dint of the calculations that are made in doing their developments, to let at around 80% of market rents. Market rents are so out of step with wages in this part of the world that simply 80% of them doesn't help. Some people may have missed in the announcement earlier in the summer, because it got lost in amongst a whole load of other housing-related announcements, that housing associations, registered social landlords, will soon be required to charge market rents to any household that has an income of more than £30,000. That's a whole household income. The whole system is cracking and breaking, and we have to find a different way of approaching it. Okay. In the rural areas and the rural villages that we work with at Action in Rural Sussex, the only way we can find to do it, to get somewhere below 80% of market rents, is by having very cooperative arrangements with landowners who release land at dramatically below market prices, something down closer to agricultural rates, so that houses can be built that are still then lettable at a low price. The problem is that even that now is starting to be problematic, because landowners will not release land for fear that the right to buy will then come into place with housing associations, and any benefit from giving that land at low price will be lost to the first people who rent them and then exercise the right to buy. This is fundamentally broken, and anybody who tries to get genuinely affordable housing anywhere in Lewes is going to have to struggle through a broken system. And I personally, for myself, find it very difficult to see how we're going to do that.
And what you're actually saying is that affordable housing is a fantasy, a broken policy, and can't be afforded. Paul, do you agree with that?
It means well, affordable housing means different things, doesn't it? I think it's a mixture of things like social rent, shared ownership. I'm not here representing Lewes Council, but Lewes Council are building new council homes. They built some down in Malling. I think they're £90 a week to rent a house. It's a really difficult problem to overcome. A lot of this, though, is not to do with the council. It's to do with government housing policy. I think that I didn't vote for this government. I think the right to buy thing is utterly appalling. The fact that whatever you think about your council, the fact that the 49 project site I'm working on is providing around 50%, possibly more, new council homes. and the fact that people have the right to buy that, I find that absolutely ridiculous. It adds to the problem, it doesn't solve the problem.
Okay. Ruth O'Keefe, what does the document say?
Right, here we go. Affordable housing is housing provided by a council or a housing association which is available below the market cost level. This can include homes rented at rent levels at approximately 50% of the local market level, social rented, homes rented at affordable rent levels at approximately 80% of the market rent, affordable rent, homes that are sold as part buy, part rent, shared ownership, or homes that are sold as part equity purchase, shared equity. I would also point out, hang on, it's very tricky because I've got so many pages here, that the District Council itself, in recent answers on the website to the community consultation, has said the government definition of affordable housing includes homes rented at up to 80% of the local market value. The government sets the local housing allowance, which is the maximum benefit anyone can receive for their home based on the size of the household. The council will not charge rent exceeding that level. Those households currently renting privately may be entitled to claim housing benefit to cover some or all of their rent. If it does not cover their rent, they need to find that shortfall. Many households on our housing register will qualify for housing benefit to help with their rental costs. And finally, in my role as the chair, I'm going to celebrate something which the District Council has done. In Lambert Place in Morling, they have, in partnership with other organisations, built 2 houses on an infill site, which people had found was supposed to be for recreation, but it was being used for recreation of a kind that the local people that were living around it weren't liking too much. So they've got 2 houses. They're being rented out, as was mentioned before, at a social rent. The properties will come back into the ownership of the council after 25 years, I believe, and the people who've built the houses paid entirely for building them and will have the rent for the first 25 years, and then they come back to the council. The result from this development, which I am celebrating, is that you've got 2 families off the housing register in 2 homes built at quite a low cost but to quite a high specification, and I don't know anybody that isn't happy with that. In celebrating that, I would like to encourage my council to carry on doing that kind of thing.
David, just briefly.
I just want to make the point that Jeremy has indicated that there is an alternative way of doing this, which is that publicly owned land is put into the deal at below market levels. That's one way that you do it. Another way that you do it is by building using much more efficient and cheaper methods. It doesn't need to be a lower standard, but it can be very good. So, for example, in the London Borough of Merton, the YMCA has just finished a wonderful development for young people coming out of care, which is being rented at 40% of market rent in London Borough of Merton, with a scheme called YKey, which is built very cheaply but with very high specifications. So we need a different approach. And I don't understand why, when Lewes District Council has clearly had a success with these homes in Morling, they're not applying a similar model to the developments that they're proposing to do that Paul's involved in on the so-called 49 sites. I think it's about the District Council saying, how do we get the best value out of our land to subsidise these homes? And let me just add to what Ruth has said with one of the things that the District Council has published in its own affordable housing needs survey, where it has said that government plans for further cuts to welfare spending from 2015 will almost certainly include cuts to housing benefit, which we know is happening, the caps are going on shortly, jeopardising the mechanism to make housing affordable in all sectors. This will increase the likelihood of evictions for households who rely on housing benefit to pay affordable rent, in addition to those renting in the private sector. Well, if that's in the housing needs assessment that's been done by our council, why aren't they not working on strategies to do something about it? And it is possible, as Jeremy has already indicated.
Right.
Can I just... Can I just come back to the 2 houses on Lambert Place? We were invited, the tenants of Lewes District were invited by Lewes District Council to go down and meet the developer and look around those houses. And they were great. They're huge, they've got really big space inside, they were really nice location. They were built by using a Chinese model, which was very cheap. And we asked them, were they going to build any more? And they said, no, they had no plans. Why?
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's not actually the case. They want to find more sites. We're working for that client as well. That's not the case.
I was told they were not building
I don't know who said
anymore.
that. I'm working for that client. They are trying to find more sites.
Okay.
What's their target?
They individually don't have a target, but they're happy to work with Lewes on more sites. And the point you made about not using those ideas on the Lewes sites, that's not the case. We are looking at those ideas.
Can you hang on a second? I want to talk about, or raise the issue of the national park, because Charles Peck you were on the planning committee, weren't you, for a time, but you're not on it now. But can we have a microphone to Mr. Peck here? Because it's confusing, because in the long run, the South Downs National Park is going to be the overriding planning authority, and we await with bated breath to discover what it's going to propose. And there has been some, as was said by the gentleman over there, some concern that the consultation process has been a bit muffled, I think is the word to use.
I can speak freely because I'm no longer a member of the Park Authority, but I can assure you I would speak freely even if I were. What you're hearing is a very good illustration of how it is to serve on any kind of council. We have Ruth's plan, a beautiful plan, full of aspirations, and very difficult to accomplish anything. And after a lot of work, we get two good houses on that street, which isn't good enough. What it really amounts to, when I use the word corruption, I mean a loss of democratic accountability. And the best example for us here tonight, don't applaud. The best example tonight is that until 2010, Lewes District Council was in charge of your local plan and was your housing authority. Since 2010 and the creation of the National Park, Lewes is still your local council and it's still your local housing authority, but the National Park Authority, South Downs National Park Authority, is the planning authority. It has to take cognizance of housing over in Lewes, and it earnestly seeks to do so, but Parliament has given it slightly different duties. This, to me, is a very English sort of thing. If you have a bit of power somewhere, the best thing to do is to cut it into a couple of pieces and give one bit over here and one bit over there, and then see what happens. Well, we're seeing the result of it right now. It means that a developer comes in and has a great plan, and Lewes District Council, for the best of motives, wants to get money for its taxpayers and recover what they see as underused assets. But that is not quite what the democratic demand is for. So I would just end by saying the National Park Authority, you must lobby them as hard as you can. And the thing you must hit them with, because they don't have a lot of power because of the way things have been split up, but they do have a statutory duty. And to quote it exactly, it's a little bit weaselish, but it's what Parliament gave us in 1949 or 1995, seek to foster the economic and social well-being of the local communities living within the national park. Now, Parliament never thought that a local community in a national park was going to be on the size of Lewes. It just was. It was going to be a few houses in Northumberland or something was going to be the local community to take account of. This is quite a different matter. And you, residually, you have the power. You can't vote the national park out, and there's no good voting Lewes District Council out because they're not the planning authority anymore. But you do have to assert yourselves as hard as you can.
Well, no. He can have can you give him the microphone back? Because I think there are one or two supplementaries that arise from that. Thank you very much, Charles. Can you give Mr. Peck the microphone back? You say, sorry, just to clarify the position, you say that there's really nothing that can be done democratically about planning decisions because the authority for the park is vast. Lewes is one of the largest. Is it the largest town within the South Downs National Park?
In any national park.
In any national park. So it's a quite unprecedented position. We've got a question from Anna Garner. I'll quote it, and you perhaps say what you think, which is, who is responsible for setting housing targets for Lewes District? How do they earmark what they want? What freedom do they have at LDC?
My wonderful former colleague Jeremy Leggett properly laughs because housing targets start in London and it filters down and it gets washed through. It's a very political sort of thing, and it's not just here. But we are here. We are the people that are here, and they can't take that away from us.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not all Thomas Paine. You know, what are we meant to do?
Well, I think come the moment, one can have ideas about what to do. We've heard about people about to be evicted because of some developer that thinks he's going to have his application eventually. What does a community do in a case like that? I just ask the question.
So you're stirring up civil unrest. And Andrew Simpson.
I'd like to propose an answer to Charles's question, which is a very good question. And what a community does in those circumstances is that it creates a viable alternative. And what Lewes Phoenix Rising has done as a community development company with 1,500 supporters, financed by local people, is to create an alternative. We now have our plan for the Phoenix estate at the pre-application stage with the National Park at the moment, because you go through the proper processes and you do the work properly. We have a great team of professionals working with us. But where did we start from that? We started from exactly the words that Charles has quoted, the economic and social well-being of the people in the national park, and in this case, the people in the town of Lewes. And in doing that, from our point of view, and this is my whole approach to the business of planning, is that you start from where you are. And there are 450 jobs, 50 companies working on that site now. Yes, Lewes needs new homes as well, and affordable and properly affordable homes. So you look at how you use that land best. Now, at the moment, it's very inefficient. It can be done a lot more efficiently, but you can preserve and build on those 450
But who
jobs.
do you have to persuade is the point. That's what Charles is saying. It's no good because you can't persuade these people.
We can persuade the South Downs National Park Authority as the planning authority. In a sense, it almost doesn't matter anymore what Lewes District Council thinks or indeed what Santon think. They happen to own the land. Well, that's something that we can come to in due course. We have to persuade the South Downs National Park Authority, and that one of the things that we're doing is going through the planning process. And what everybody in this room can do is to write to the National Park Authority, the planning officer, Stephen Cantwell, who will listen to all your concerns, and they will be put to the planning committee in due course.
But what is due course? When is it that the South Downs
will
come up with a plan? I mean, if it's 20 years away, what good is it? It's all hot air.
Well, interestingly, David, of course, that because the local plan is a joint plan at the moment between Lewes District and the National Park, and it hasn't yet been adopted because it's not sound, because it doesn't provide enough affordable homes, then the whole system is a bit stalled at the moment. Now, the developer and Lewes District Council, as far as Phoenix is concerned, want to get their application through before the plan is found sound, because when the neighbourhood plan for Lewes has been written, which is another form of planning, then they won't stand a chance, because all of a sudden, that's another thing that people can do in this room tonight, you can get involved in the neighbourhood planning process, because when the neighbourhood plan says we don't want those buildings to be demolished and all those businesses to be wiped out, instead we want to build on what there is now, then the Santon and Lewes District Council plan will not fly.
All right.
Now, so that's the solution.
Ruth O'Keefe.
Thank you very much. Aspirationally speaking, by 2030, apparently, the parts of the district within the South Downs National Park will have been conserved and enhanced under the leadership of the National Park Authority, and the area will be better understood and enjoyed by residents, businesses and visitors. It doesn't explain how, but that is what it says. The distribution of residential development, sections 6.27 and 6.28, do state the following. The core strategy sets the overarching approach for how new housing will be distributed across the plan area in the period up to 2030. This approach reflects the findings of the evidence base, including where the greatest levels of housing need are, the input received from the consultation and engagement undertaken, and the findings of the sustainability appraisal process. And the next bit is, in identifying an overarching approach, it is not the role of the core strategy to identify and allocate every single housing site. More detail, including the allocation of specific sites, will come through the District Council's Site allocations and development management policies and the National Park Local Plan. In some areas, neighbourhood plans, as has been mentioned by Andrew, may provide this detail. So what it's saying is that it's not just the National Park or the local authority at the higher level, it is, and I am merely telling you this from the plan, it is the neighbourhood plan that could provide the detail of where sites were. In such cases, the National Park Authority and District Council will support the production of these plans, neighbourhood plans, as they will assist in delivering some of the strategic aims of the core strategy.
Aaron?
More than that, I cannot say.
Jeremy, does that accord with what you think is happening and likely to happen?
Can I make 2 comments? One I want to repeat 3 times. Get involved in the neighbourhood plan. Get involved in the neighbourhood plan, and then get deeply involved in the neighbourhood plan, because that is the mechanism that the planning system, such as it now is, has given you to take control of the planning system at a town level. So whatever you may think of the progress that has been made up to now, get involved in the neighbourhood plan.
And what do you mean by that? What do you do to get involved?
Can I answer that?
Neighbourhood plan is led by the town council. This is the most unusual change to the planning system that happened 4 or 5 years ago. Each town and parish council has the opportunity to draft a detailed neighbourhood plan for its area, which it then puts to the district council. The district council then can adopt it, and it goes to referendum and inspection. It's putting a degree of control back down to the very local level. The national park has to take account of it. But it is worth saying a little bit more about the national park. As Charles has said, the national park is now the planning authority for Lewes. Lewes is the biggest settlement in any national park in the country. If you want to, it's worth having a look at the map of something like the Peak District National Park, because the practice when national parks were originally designated was to make holes in them, so that the major towns didn't form, the population of the major towns didn't form part of the population of the park itself. We didn't do that when the South Downs was designated, so Petersfield and Lewes are both form part of the population of the national park. And that means the National Park Authority is your planning authority. Now, the problem that gives is that National Park has twin purposes: to protect and enhance the environment and the landscape, and secondly, to explain it and help people to enjoy it. And its duties, as Charles Peck read them out, are secondary to those. Now, what that means is that when the National Park looks at the housing needs for the entire park area in relation to the surrounding urban areas, it then has to decide where that housing needs to go. And because its first purpose is to preserve the landscape, where does it look? It looks immediately at the 2 main settlements. And it's not true to say that the National Park isn't consulting on this. The National Park's draft local plan that contains the housing numbers for the next 20 years in excruciating detail, down to exactly where they're going to be, is out for consultation right at this moment. This is absolutely the time both to get involved in the neighbourhood plan for Lewes as the means of influencing the national park, but also to get involved in looking at the national park's own local plan in order to influence the way in which they're allocating housing. Frankly, they are trying to pack too much open market housing into Lewes and Petersfield because they don't want to put any in the small communities that actually need that development as affordable housing. That is our fundamental strategic problem, and Lewes can help to solve it by getting involved in its neighbourhood plan and in the National Parks local plan.
Jeremy, just before you leave the point, what's the timetable for this? Because Andrew was saying, people are trying to slip in under the net, so to speak, before the National Park has made its detailed provisions for planning.
I think, to be honest,
so, where are we now? 2015. When is this national park
I think we can
plan going to be announced
we
or
can possibly
decided?
make a bit too much of that, because the joint local plan between the national park and Lewes district for the bit of Lewes that's in the national park, that joint plan is one of the building blocks on which the national park has drafted their new local plan for the whole park. So there isn't a dramatic difference between the two, but what is becoming clearer is about this very strong focus for open market housing into the major settlements in the park. And that, I think, is what one needs to question in order to get affordable housing in Lewes, but also affordable housing in the other rural villages around Lewes as well in the national park.
I'm Dom Ramos. I was born and brought up in Lewes. The notion of sustainability was invoked by Ruth O'Keefe just earlier, and also the idea of deriving economic benefit, possibly through social rents and so on. So what do the panel think of the fact that Santon Developments on the 23rd of February 2012 lodged a bank account in the Isle of Man, and indeed a number of the other developers in the area have done the same? What does this say, I want to ask the panel, for the ideas of sustainability and of deriving economic development for the town?
Andrew?
Working as I do in the world of planning and development, then that's not an uncommon practice, of course. What I would say, though, is that for me, one of the critical factors in development of any place is that it starts from where the local people are starting from. And it requires, therefore, a developer to understand a place and to make efforts, if it doesn't belong to that place, make great efforts to understand that place before it puts its plans forward. Now, what is very evident from the way that this particular developer, Santon, seemed to be behaving, and it is very different from other funds and developers that I work with, is that their primary concern is their shareholders who are based in a boardroom a long way from here, with other concerns altogether, and probably don't even know where the town of Lewes is, never mind what the concerns of Lewes are. And sadly, in this particular case, whilst that's often the case with developers who are funded by pension funds or whatever, sometimes from all over the world, in this particular case, their local representative here in our town has made very little effort to genuinely understand what this town requires. So, tax domicile methods and so forth, that's back to what Jeremy was saying about global capitalism, but a developer has a responsibility to start from where a town is, and that isn't happening in this case.
Speakers have mentioned the Lewes Neighbourhood Plan without saying very much about it. There is a public exhibition involving it on the 8th of September in the Corn Exchange here. October, I beg your pardon, wrong month. I'm so keen to participate. It's the 8th of October, 1 till 10 in the Corn Exchange, and the following day from 9:30 until 1. So there is ample opportunity for people to stick their two penneth in that. But the question, Chair, relates to the National Park, where here it is making decisions for Lewes, but there is no Lewes voice on the National Park Planning Committee, and I wonder why. We have someone from the bustling metropolis of Southeast, someone from almost as bustling West Meston and Ditchling, but no one from Lewes, the very town which should have its voice heard in these matters.
Thank you very much. You're our statutory victim. Just explain why there's nobody from Lewes, could you, on the national park planning? I mean, did everybody vote for the National Park Authority? We were all allowed to vote.
No one voted for it.
I thought I voted for it. You sure? What?
The Park Authority...
You didn't just become a member, did you?
Oh, I became a member because I was a Wealden district
councillor,
councillor.
yes.
And there are 15 local authorities in the park. And out of them, 14 members of the South Downs National Park Authority are nominated by their respective councils. So I climbed the greasy pole at Hailsham and persuaded the leader to send me there. This was helped by the fact that I actually live in the park at Friston, and the national government says it's good to have people who live in the park on the park authority wherever possible. Each other council did the same thing, but I don't know what exactly was the mechanism used at Lewes, but it's probably at the behest of the leader. In addition to those 14 members, there are 6 parish council members who are selected, 2 from each of the 3 counties, Hampshire, West Sussex, East Sussex, by a series of elections conducted in a slightly third world way, which comes up with 2 parish councillors from each county. And then the final group are 7 members of the South Downs National Park Authority who are appointed by the minister for a fixed term of years. So they are even less democratically accountable than I am. I can at least be voted out of office somewhere, not in Lewes, but where I lived. But they are immune. But this is the way all national parks are set up.
And so the fact that there is nobody from Lewes on the planning committee is...
It's a matter for Lewes District Council. I would have thought, if I had been leader of Lewes District Council, I would have been quite tempted to send someone to the Park Authority from Lewes, given that Lewes is a large number of voters and the most significant urban creation in any national park in the country. And the Park Authority does recognize that we had a peculiar challenge by having a town of such substance and importance and history and pride in the park. And how are we going to deal with it, given what Jeremy has said the 2 statutory purposes are to conserve and enhance the landscape. Landscape is the golden thread in the national park. And the second purpose is to enable people to come out and enjoy the special qualities of the park, the landscape, and so on. Okay. Translating that into Lewes, you have to remember Lewes is a very attractive place. It should be conserved and enhanced, and people should be enabled to enjoy it, and we should have decent housing in order to meet that social and economic goal I mentioned earlier.
Right. Thank you.
David, could I just inform the audience there that there is a representative on the National Parks Planning Committee from Lewes District Council, of course, Councillor Tom Jones.
But not from Lewes.
But doesn't live in Lewes, but the point I want to make...
He's the ditchling man, is he?
He's the bustling ditchling man. But the point I want to make is that Councillor Tom Jones's job is to sit on the National Park Planning Committee, to be involved in decisions about planning applications, and in this particular case on the Phoenix development, then he is likely to be, but we need to think about whether this is right or not, sitting in judgment on a planning application being put forward by a developer with whom the District Council has a joint venture. And Tom has been one of those people promoting that joint venture. And when we've asked him, for example, whether he is concerned about the quality of the plan that is being put forward by Santon, he has said, it's not a matter for me, we're not the planning authority, we are acting as a landowner. So in effect, if Tom Jones represents Lewes District on the National Parks Planning Committee with the Phoenix scheme, he will be there as a landowner and not as an elected member.
I want to move on to, in a moment, to look at the new homes, the 49 or whatever it is, new homes that are planned, and also specifically the Phoenix estate, the North Street site. But and then I want to go on to the issue of democratic control or involvement. But Rafik Kapinski, you've been listening to all this, and you have looked at the way these things work. Do you get a sense that there is no vision, that there is no statutory vision, no governmental, no real grasp of the issues that are involved? What is your opinion on that?
I'm a little shocked, frankly, that strategic planning is reduced to meeting a housing target. And you cannot see the housing and residential issue outside of the employment and sustainability issue. And beyond the democratic deficit in the national parks is their remit. And I only hear housing targets, housing targets, housing targets I see nowhere in the system where somebody's thinking strategically about the future. Think of Germany and renewable energy, for example. The Germans have realized that the 21st century is not just an environmental crisis waiting to happen, but it's a business opportunity. So the Germans have got a higher proportion of renewable energy than any other country in Europe, because somebody at the top of the system, or people at the top of the system, see opportunity and think to the future. China also has strategically targeted the renewable sector because they're thinking about 10 or 15 years down the future. Who is doing that? We don't see that. And I would like to pick up the point about the LDC being an owner, as well also as an authority responsible for the strategic direction of Lewes. And the big deficit I see is a strategic deficit. And I see thought going back to the 20th century rather than to the 21st century, and how those opportunities can be grasped. So it's a little depressing. And I do a lot of work in the third world. Somebody mentioned a third world system of representation. I see a lot more strategic thinking and planning in developing countries than I'm seeing in this case in Lewes.
Jeremy, just briefly, do you want to comment on that?
Just very briefly, people have mentioned a couple of times housing targets. There are no housing targets. The housing targets we used to have were swept away 5 years ago. What there is now is a requirement on each planning authority, in this case the National Park, to assess objectively what the housing need is, which goes absolutely to this point of us being obsessed with housing over all other strategic development, to objectively assess how much housing is needed, and then to cooperate with their neighbouring planning authorities, and to agree amongst themselves where housing should go in order to meet the objectively assessed housing need. It's called the duty to cooperate. So we have no strategy. We have no structure plan, no southeast plan, nothing that is assessing housing or other strategic development requirements across the southeast. We simply have a duty for each local planning authority to cooperate with its neighbour over providing the amount of houses that they have objectively assessed are needed. What they actually all do is get together and agree amongst themselves that none of them can meet their objectively assessed housing needs, and therefore they don't. And then they go and fight it out with the inspector to try and get their new local plan through in the absence of providing sufficient affordable housing.
So does nobody police the duty?
No, not other than the planning inspector, who then looks at the plans all coming forward and says, have you cooperated or not? And they're okay if they've cooperated and all agreed that it's not possible to meet the required numbers.
Okay.
I have, in fact, 11 strategic objectives in my plan here, which outline the direction the local plan will take in order to achieve its vision of Lewes District in 2030. The first one is being to stimulate and maintain a buoyant and balanced economy. The next one is to maintain and enhance the vitality and viability of the district's town centres. The next one, the third one, is to deliver the homes and accommodation for the needs of the district. Then we've got take advantage of the richness and diversity of the district's natural and heritage assets to promote sustainable tourism. I apologise for slightly paraphrasing. I know they're very exciting, but so anybody that's listening that wants to censor me, I'm doing my best here. This is all me promoting the district. To work with other agencies to improve the accessibility to key community services and facilities, to conserve and enhance the high quality and character of the district's towns, villages and rural environments, to conserve and enhance the natural beauty, wildlife and cultural heritage, to maximise opportunities for reusing suitable previously developed land, to reduce the need for travel and to promote a sustainable system of transport, to ensure the district reduces causes of climate change, and to reduce the district's vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. And that there is more exciting detail on these in pages 30 to 32 of the local district.
And how well is it being executed?
That one I can't comment on. I would leave that to other people.
Right, I thought you might. Thank you very much, though, for that. Rosalind Hurst.
To the astonishment of everyone, I did have another name. I actually was in St. Pierre, But that was from my private email. And Ruth and I are county councillors for the town. And I represent, for those people that don't know, everything from, not everything, nearly everything, from the War Memorial down to the station and along Friars Walk and down the cliff and all of South Street and all of South Malling and Ringmer and Barkham and Hamsey and Cooksbridge.
And
So
I've got the rest.
a very wide area, and Ruth has the rest of the town, as I say. When I first came to Lewes in 1974, there was a very interesting set of figures came from British Rail, that the same amount of people came into the town each morning as left. So the town was attracting a lot of students and workers coming in, and there were commuters going out, and the town was perfectly balanced in this strange, strange way. Now, a lot of people, including myself, came to Lewes because it's a great town and it has great traditions and it has lots of old families. But when we look around the main part of the town centre, many of those families aren't there. Where are they? They're living in Lamport and in Malling, and I don't hear very much about those families today. I'm also very, very surprised that there is nothing today, and I do understand that today you're looking at North Street in particular, that there is a huge proposal for housing on Malling Farm, which is a long way from the town on the far side of Malling, where people will be very isolated and there's no infrastructure there for them. And so I think it's more than the North Street. I think it's the whole town, and I'm afraid that there is a town on the other side of the river, and there are commercial buildings on the other side of the river, and that we need to, in fact, maybe if we built more bridges, people would be a little bit more aware of what goes on there.
Just to clarify, I'm sorry to be ignorant about this, but were those planning decisions were made by whom?
Lewes District. It's in the Lewes District Core Plan. And
so the town has no control over these things, is what you're saying, really?
I'm looking at the town councillors on this, but I don't think there's a huge amount of support for it. It is that they're looking to place 4,000 homes within the district, and there is pressure. Now, in addition to that, Chairman, there is the issue out at Ringmer, and I see there are some people here from Ringmer today who are tearing their hair out at a development there. They had identified a field in their village plan for 70 houses, or thereabouts, 50 houses, very, very good, and now the developer's trying to put in 171. Now, this brings me back to my role as a county councillor, and you all will ask, what do we do? So the question, but I'm trying to explain where I'm coming from, and thank you for that. My question is also about infrastructure. There are more cars now going through Earwig Corner than down the A27. I am desperate to get the Lewes-Ackfield line rebuilt. People will know that. So I'm very worried about infrastructure. But my question to the panel was totally different, so I'm sorry about this, to rant on.
No, you've been very interesting, but he's quite right. Let's have your question.
Now, the question is about housing for older people. Now, we look around here, quite a few people in my age range. And honestly, a lot of us are living in very big houses. And one of the reasons why we're living in very big houses is, yes, we probably have got hordes of grandchildren and people want to come and stay. But actually, there is nowhere in Lewes to downsize.
Right.
And I will say, within the private sector, and I think to release housing for families. So within the plans, I don't see anything which attracts older people to move into not squitty little flats and pokey and dark and horrid, but actually really nice apartments to make that attractive.
Rosa, thank you very much. I'll come to you in a second. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah,
as general as you can.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, I think that you're right. I mean, my mother spent decades in our four-bedroom family house on the Neville estate, living on her own after we'd all left home. I mean, moving on to the 49 sites with the architects for that project, we're working on the first 13 of them at the moment, and a lot of that is about building to meet housing needs. So it's looking at building one-bedroom flats, two-bedroom flats that will start to meet that need, and while at the same time building 50% or more affordable housing. So I feel like I'm slightly in the lion's den here tonight because I'm working as an architect for the district council. But there's a genuine, I think there's a genuine understanding of that housing need, and within very difficult constraints, people are trying to work that out alongside the South Downs National Park. There are regular meetings with them trying to solve the problem. There's a lot of cynicism here tonight about what the council are doing, and I'm not seeing it working for them. I know that people are working very hard, the housing department are working very hard to solve those sort of problems.
Why won't they come and discuss it?
I can't answer that.
All right. Can you get a microphone to that man with his hand in the air, if that's what it's for? Oh, the woman, sorry, yet again. But I want to bring Debbie in on this because we heard reference to people living in Landport and Malling, and you said you wanted to say a word about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of say, particularly about sheltered housing, there is very little sheltered housing currently in Lewes that's council owned. And it is a massive problem for people who are living in large homes, particularly in Landport and Malling and those areas, that want to downsize from a 3-bedroom, for example, to go to a 1-bedroom property, not necessarily a flat, perhaps a bungalow or something of that ilk. And they just cannot do it. Therefore, they are holding up, no fault of their own, the whole process of being able to house other families. We really must address this issue. And it's something that needs to be done, I think, very quickly, because there are 1,397 people on the council housing list across the district. Where are they going to go?
Yeah, so you need to build housing. You need to build housing, don't you?
Could I speak up for young people in this debate too, please? The primary housing need that's identified in the town of Lewes, with all due respect to older people who do need somewhere
I was
to
just
stay,
answering a question about old
no,
people.
No, absolutely,
so,
Debbie. I know. I just want to sort of move on from your, because you're absolutely right. But the primary need is for younger people who are looking for somewhere to live, who want to stay in Lewes, but who can't afford to stay in the town. Now, we are proposing the Lewes Phoenix Rising proposals for the Phoenix estate, 49 live-work units that will be aimed at young people who want to leave home and stay working in the town, and they can be provided at 40% of market rent because we've done the figures on those. So I think that's one point I want to make. To add to what Debbie was saying, I think the other point I want to make is about the 49 sites. This is just about how they were selected. Everyone's been talking about how localism and neighbourhood planning is a great thing. And Ros St-Pierre mentioned the neighbourhood plan in Ringmer, which is being ridden over roughshod, it seems, by the district council as a planning authority at the moment, I'm sorry to say, because it's not in the national park. The CPRE, the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, if you look on their website at the moment, they're asking some significant questions about how the 49 sites that are being worked on have been selected. And they make 2 points. One point that they make is that when the national neighbourhood plans for Ringmer and for other parts and indeed Lewes were being promoted, there was a call for sites. The council was asked to put sites forward into the neighbourhood plans and didn't. Secondly, they want to know how these 49 sites got selected in the first place, because as we know, and as Ruth has publicised, the local authority members haven't got a clue. And for a while, it would seem that there was almost a secretive process going on as to how those sites had been selected. And I'm afraid, again, it reflects badly on the district council, that only through a process of letters to the press and people asking were those sites identified. And even then, and this is, I think, something perhaps for Paul to think about, we haven't been asked what we want to happen on those sites. Plans have been put forward in consultation that was badly advertised, and we're being told what will happen on those sites.
All right, Paul, do you want to answer that point? Hang on.
Well, I don't know if you attended the consultation events. People weren't told what was going on the site.
Speaking to me.
We were told the sites were here and on display, and people. I don't know how the sites were selected because they were selected before we became involved. But people were asked about the sites and for their comments on the sites. Obviously, the majority of those sites are going to be housing sites because people are talking about housing need tonight as if it isn't that important. It's really, really important.
Absolutely not.
No, well, people are saying that people are saying housing need in a sort of flippant way, as if it's sort of, as if the council isn't trying to sort it out. The 49 sites are going to be housing sites, if they can be. There'll be some commercial space on them as well, but that's where the need is.
Hello. Yes, my point actually leads straight on from the point just made by Andrew, particularly, and also about Paul, about the 49 sites, which I understand has already been whittled down to 30, actually, over the last few months. I live very close to one of the sites that's actually been listed, and very little consultation has taken place. But what I do understand is actually pretty much every one of those 30 sites is a community asset, and quite why Lewes District Council thinks it's a good idea to take a community asset away from a community.
How do you define a community asset?
Well,
what
the community
are they, these
assets
sites?
that I live near is our playing fields and our village green. I live in a rural community, and that is our singular, only community asset. And a large number of houses, we're pretty much, well, it seems that they're going to be enforced upon us with very little consultation, in fact, zero consultation, and that the developers, Caris, were already signed up several months prior to anybody knowing that this was going to take place.
Ruth O'Keefe, is this what is happening from your observation?
I can only say that when I have asked about this, I have been informed that the sites were chosen because they were underused or derelict. That is what I was told when I asked.
They were I missed the last word. Underused or
derelict.
Or derelict. A derelict playing field.
I can further confirm from the core strategy, though, that community facilities are a key factor in the development of sustainable communities.
My name is Jackie Bishop, and for the last 2 years, I've been helping Ruth and Stephen Catlin, excuse me, I've got a folky voice, try to retain the toilets, extremely good community asset. I think you'd all agree that toilets are an absolute necessity, and this is the only third toilet in the town that we have. It is also the gateway to the national park. And these 49 sites, as far as I understand it, and I have come from a meeting last week with an officer from Lewes District Council when I tried to speak to her about a compromise which we could put towards the developers. I asked for the developer to be there, and that was refused. I asked for a site visit, and that was refused. And I wanted to get her to see, and so I could illustrate and ask her what she proposed, and having been discussed, although she said she hadn't discussed it, what type of housing would go on at Western Road. Now, my question tonight to Mr. Zara is, what type of housing, and you must be aware of this site opposite St Anne's Church in Western Road, which are currently very, very derelict toilets, which are being told that they're underused. The only reason they look like they're underused is because they've done nothing to improve them in the last 2 years.
All right, I think you made the question. You put the point.
I'd like to ask, please, what type of housing do you propose to build?
All right, now we allow him to answer.
Okay.
Paul Zara.
I don't know the tenure of the housing. I know the site is big enough to take two family houses. Sorry.
Two family houses. That is not affordable housing. The houses
that depends on the tenure, doesn't it?
The houses in Western Road, if they are sold for private housing, will fetch in the region of 450 to 500,000. What person living in this town on 25 to 30,000 pounds a year can afford that? You just tell me.
I can't speak for it.
Can I? Is there, Paul Zara, is there a policy about these 49 sites that they're all meant to be either affordable housing or social housing of some kind, or are they a ragbag of things?
The whole purpose of the plan is to take the sites as a whole, rather than whatever the specific number is, which does change because some things are found out about sites. It turns out they're not developable for some reason. But the idea is to look at the sites collectively rather than individually. Because if you look at the sites individually, some of them are very small and they wouldn't trigger any affordable housing need if it wouldn't meet the numbers of units that would require affordable housing. So if the council just flogged those sites off, you'd get far less affordable housing. This plan gives you around 50% affordable housing across those sites, which is more than policy, and it's going to give you a lot more affordable housing than you would have got through a sale route.
Okay.
It's not my policy. I'm an architect. I design things. But I can tell you that and part of the reason for getting us on board is to make sure that the design quality of all of those sites, whether it's affordable, whatever tenure of type of housing it is very high quality, because it needs to be.
But Ruth, is there any proportion already decided, or is it just haphazard how the 49 sites will be used?
That's such a good question. I went to the consultation, and on one side of the room I was told there would be no affordable housing provided in Lewes. On the other side of the room I was told that 2 of the sites in Lewes would have affordable housing on them. I was also told that affordable housing is 80% of market rent. In total, across all of the sites in the plan, I have been told that there should be 40% affordable housing. I've also been told that there'll be no housing at social rent. I don't think any of that can be wicked because that's just factual, to the best of my knowledge and belief.
All right. I want to move on to Phoenix, because we talked about the 49, and we're not here until midnight. We've got to be out of here at 9:30, which gives us a half an hour more. Mr. Banerjee, you're well known on all these issues, and people have heard your opinions, and thank you for coming in. Could we just have a question from you about Phoenix, and then we can open up that debate?
Will LDC and Santon's current proposal create a cohesive and lively community in character with Lewes town environment, providing adequate employment and appropriate housing for the needs of the town, an important responsibility LDC is entrusted with?
Thank you very much. Rafia Kaplinski, perhaps you'd like to start on that. Will the Santon LDC proposal create a cohesive, lively community in character with the Lewes town environment, providing adequate employment and appropriate housing?
I'm going to focus in on the employment issue, if you don't mind. I think the housing issue we've spoken about at great depth. It's helpful here to think about international experience. If you look at living standards across the world, living standards are not so much things associated with countries, they're things associated with localities within countries. So in America you get Silicon Valley and you get Detroit. In Britain we get parts of the northeast and we get Berkshire. In Italy you get Naples and you get Emilia-Romagna. So we have to understand, why is it that in some localities incomes are high, sustainable and growing, and in other areas they're not? And the answer is, a large part of the story is explained by what economists call clusters, industrial districts. In each of these high-income, growing areas of the world, we have a clustering of economic activities of a similar sort. So we get films in Hollywood, we get ham in Parma, we get motor racing cars in Northampton, we get new media in Brighton. There are 12,500 people in the Brighton area working in new media, contributing £750 million to the local economy. So why is it that high incomes come from a peculiar, counterintuitive clustering of like enterprises? You'd think that wouldn't work, would you? And the answer is they benefit from what we call spillovers, external economies. So if like enterprises cluster together, the skills can move between one firm and another firm. They can share equipment. Customers come to their area because they know then there's more than one supplier, and suppliers come to their area because they know that there's more than one buyer. So these industrial clusters are the things that every rational planner pants for. That's what they want, which we're not seeing in Lewes, incidentally. Now, the next lesson of international experience is that these clusters are very difficult to create. Many places have tried to create clusters out of nowhere, and they wasted a lot of money. Successful clusters and regional authorities which make these clusters grow build with what's there. You've got to start with what's there, build it and reinforce it. So you've got to ask yourself, in any locality which seeks to thrive, what are the unique capabilities in those capabilities that a planner can look at and say, how do we augment those? How do we make those work? Well, in Lewes, you've got the creative industries. It's a very... I'm not making this point as a consumer of the creative industries, I'm making this point as an economist. This is an area where many livelihoods are arising from this general area of the creative sector. Now then, let's turn to the Santon proposal. What is the Santon proposal doing about the creative cluster? If you read the documentation, it's creating an estate in Malling Brooks. Those who've looked at some of the creative enterprises in Lewes looked at what sorts of space they have, what sorts of rents they're paying, and then go to the new Morningbrooks walled construction site in Morningbrooks, we'll see that there's an enormous disjuncture. The rents are hopelessly unreachable by this nascent creative cluster, which is the wellspring for Lewis's future, which is the thing which gives us the possibility of being a knowledge-intensive local economy. So firms that I visited, for example, are faced with a rent demand of £2,000 compared to the £500 they're paying at the moment. Or in another case, a firm in the manufacturing sector is faced with a rent increasing from, I think it's 3.75 per square foot to £7.50 per square foot. The rents are unaffordable. The places are wholly inappropriate. So I go back to my central story. We have to think of Lewis's future in an integrated way. Of course, we have to think about housing, but we have to think about the co-location of housing and employment. And if we're thinking about employment, we have to think about employment for the 21st century, employment which yields high and sustainable incomes, and therefore we have to work with what we've got. We've got a unique capability, and Santon is going to throw that away. You know where they're going to go? I'm helping with the regeneration of New Haven. We're licking our lips in New Haven. Maybe we can get the artists to move out of Lewes into the Lewes area. Maybe we can get some of the manufacturing enterprises to move out. Of course I don't mean that, but you understand the central point I'm making.
Good evening, my name's Ian Freeston. It's my third year down on the Phoenix estate. First year and a half we built a skate park which is still being used by the local people. Currently I have an interactive art installation opening on this coming Friday called Bordering on the Ridiculous. We are the building that our lease is up at the end of this month. So we're unit 10 as you look along from Tesco's. It's got Harticle written on the side at the moment. So we as a group of artists are appealing, if there's any more time, and then we might be squatting, and you can all come down and have a cup of tea if we squat. My concern issue since I've been in this town, one through meeting the youngsters at the skate park, the young people in this town, is the 20 to 30-year-olds that work at Glyndebourne, work in the bars, work in many businesses around here, majority of them are living with their parents. And I find, as someone that doesn't have children, no ex-wives, I'm surprised that people are just not more furious about the fact that in the 70s, 80s, 90s, people got out of the house, got their own property, renting, people were squatting, creativity was happening. And now this looks like some feudal return through the finance and the trapping of people that they can't afford to live somewhere. It's disgusting.
Okay.
And I really go with what you're saying. It's a broken system. And if we had followed what Thomas Paine said, we would not have been celebrating the longest monarch in this country. We would have got rid of that system.
All right, thank you very much.
Luke Pensony, recently here, a planner and from another life. My observation is that...
Hang on a second, a planner from another life. We're just have to
I wanted to skip over that, but since you raised it...
Yes.
I trained as a planner in the late 70s at Heriot Watt in Scotland, and I've been involved with projects internationally. I've been involved in many projects internationally, and I'm a recent arrival in Lewes. And I note the absence, because we talk so much about housing, we talk about factors, we talk about benefit, we talk about industrial issues and factors. In all that Ruth said, there was only one mention of community, and it was in the context of services, which is something that keeps district authorities and governments up at night. How do they keep everybody alive and kicking, or whatever? I think we all know, and there's enormous frustration in listening to what we had to listen to about the dysfunctionality of how we communicate. But in order for community to happen, we all have to be present. And so my question of the panel is, knowing as we do that there's this glimmer of hope in the neighborhood plan, as Mr. Leggett had referred to earlier, how do we arrange a situation where all stakeholders, and I hesitate to use that because it's a planning term, but are present and make the best use possible of Phoenix as an incredible opportunity for us to work as a community, but all have to be represented. Because what I'm hearing is everything is going on separately from everything else.
Right.
Whether it's the national park, whether it's what the council have to deal with, whether it's whatever, whether it's even issues like studio operators in Phoenix. There does not yet seem to be a forum wherein real stakeholders connect. How can that happen?
Thank you very much.
A lot of what we do at Action in Rural Sussex is helping other towns and villages outside of Lewes with their neighbourhood plan process. And I think it's probably fair to say that over the 2-3 year life that it takes from starting a neighbourhood plan through to taking it to referendum, because that's one critical part of the neighbourhood plan process, is taking a plan to referendum within the community that has drafted it. The thing that takes most perseverance, most active thought, and often most external help, which is often where we come in, is actually engaging the entire community in the process. Because the first instinct of most, even large villages, is that the people who know, the articulate, the well-empowered, the people who know the system, their first instinct is to get together in a room and draft it and say, we can get this done in about 6 months and then we'll consult the village on it. And the first thing we always have to do is to work through, usually with the parish council or the town council who are leading the process, to say, no, you can't do it that way. What you have to do is to plan an engagement process by which you involve young people, often separately, often asking them slightly different questions, putting on events which actually are fun to come to, rather than rather dry, dusty exhibitions and village hall meetings, to engage other people who are not used to being engaged because they're very, very seldom asked. And actually, they're likely to be the people who will be the recipients of the affordable housing at the end, if such a thing as affordable housing does really exist. So you're absolutely right, and it's what you have to put attention to. I suspect that when it comes to the issues we're talking about tonight, one of our problems here in Lewes is that local government and the local government systems have left us over-administered but under-governed in any sense of strategic governance that tries to engage people.
Okay, thank you. Ruth O'Keefe, how do you think that the community should go about bringing these ideas, and to whom should they bring them?
The neighbourhood plan is a really good thing to get involved with because it will inform the other ones. And if we've got it, sadly, even if people don't take as much notice of it as they should, we'll get more of the developers' money. Because if you don't have a plan, you get 15% of the community infrastructure levy. And if you do have a plan, you get 25%. So in the last bastion, after you didn't manage to prevent whatever it was happening, you get more money to make other things with. That's very cynical. I probably shouldn't have said that. I should have celebrated something. In the core strategy to create healthy, sustainable communities, we need to work in partnership with other organisations to ensure adequate access to health, education and other community services and facilities, and to reduce inequalities across the district. We need to determine the best way of addressing inadequacies in the provisional quality of recreational facilities and open spaces, particularly for children and teenagers. We need to support the quality of community life through partnership working to promote social inclusion, tackle deprivation, encourage community cohesion and participation, encourage healthy lifestyles and reduce the fear of crime. So in theory, it's all in there. But for now, in practical terms, I would say get involved with the neighbourhood plan.
Okay. And Debbie Twitchen, do you feel excluded with your involvement in social housing, the tenancies and all that, from the debate that's going around, for instance, at Phoenix, or do you feel you're part of that debate on what should happen on the North Street site?
I think that any plan that involves proper social rents is a good one. I do think that there probably should be more provision for socially rented properties down there. I've heard that said from people.
More than Phoenix Rising are proposing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
On what sort of scale?
I don't know, probably another sort of 10 or 15 at least. But in terms of Landport, we're very much out on a limb. There are 411 council houses still on Landport. The rest of them are now privately owned or private to let. That is changing the dynamics of our community quite a lot. Some people don't want to be involved in things because they don't have the time, because they're too busy going to their jobs. In London, I have to say, there have been quite a few people moving down onto our estate from London or the surrounding area who are buying to let and then renting them out at very, very expensive prices. There are houses now on Landport that are going for £1,100 a month to rent for a 3-bedroomed house. That is just crazy. So the community that I know and love down there, and I know some people in this room know and love down there, is changing dramatically because a lot of those people do not want to be involved in anything. They're probably too tired when they come back from London, I don't know. But we have a good community down there, and I would encourage anybody that lives on Landport that's here tonight to get involved with the neighbourhood plan, because I think it's really important, particularly to hear from younger people. I do think that when I went to the neighbourhood plan presentation that younger people weren't really represented very well, and I would like to see a lot more young people involved.
Here we are, Lewes Phoenix Rising as a company with a great team of people have organised an event, and here you all are. So I think we have a lot of stakeholders in the room this evening who are giving their points of view, and I think it's regrettable that the statutory authorities either haven't joined in or indeed haven't participated in the planning of this event. And we're a community developer, let's remember, so we are here to promote developments on behalf of our community. So we're not there to generate profit to go back to boardrooms in South Africa. We're here to generate profit to reinvest in our community. The second point I want to make about the neighbourhood planning process, which can pick up the County Hall issue too. Lewes Town desperately needs a neighbourhood plan. Progress is being made, but it's inevitably slow because it's a complex process. But with respect to the North Street site, let's remember that that is an application that's already in front of the National Park Authority, and if we're not careful, the views of the neighbourhood plan will have no impact at all on the way in which the National Park Authority consider the plan. So what's the solution to that? Malloy says, does the Santon Lewes District Council plan create a cohesive and lively community on the new estate? Well, I think Rafi Kaplinski answered that question. The answer is it is already a cohesive and lively community on that estate, as we heard from some of the people here this evening who live and work there. And I think that, back to what Rafi was saying, you don't, through planning, and as a planner I can say this, is how we practice our work in all the schemes we do, you don't destroy what you've already got, but you build from it. So that's... but now let's... So, I'll keep it brief, David. The last point I want to make then is that how do you do that? Well, you invest over time. And there are very good buildings down there at the moment that are currently being used that are in a poor condition but can be invested in and brought into much better condition. The existing industrial buildings, for example, which Santon and Lewes District Council want to destroy. So you invest in those over time, and around those you can build the sorts of numbers of genuinely affordable homes that Debbie was talking about. We're looking at 50 or so. We could probably increase the number of those, Debbie, at social rent for young people who want to live and work in the town in a sustainable way, again in the way that Rafi talks about. What's actually happening today, as we've already heard there, is that the leases that people have there are now starting to come to an end. Those businesses are going to start closing. And what are those businesses we're talking about? Well, there's some of the studios. The lease has already gone on one of those buildings. The foundry workshops, that lease will come up next March. But what about Compass Travel? Those of you who use the buses in the East Sussex, the rural buses, 500,000 bus journeys a year are provided by Compass Travel, who will not be able to afford to stay there when their lease comes to an end, and they will go unless an alternative is provided. So what we're asking for is that Lewes District Council and Santon look at their response, particularly Lewes District Council with all its lovely aims and objectives around economic sustainability, ensure that before any of those leases are terminated and those people go, that they work with their commercial partner, Santon, to provide alternatives that are affordable, not in the way that Rafi described as being unaffordable, are affordable here in the town of Lewes. It's no good having Compass Travel based in Newhaven because the buses the routes that they serve are around Lewes. Equally, all those lovely activities that go on in their cluster that Rafi talked about is here in Lewes. You can't transport a cluster elsewhere.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Paul.
I'd just like to make just a couple of brief points. I think we've talked about community, and I think that was a really important point for you to raise. But I think Lewes is a small town. It hasn't grown much since I was born here, and I think we should think of it as not as Lamport Estate, Morling Estate, but one community. My mum, who lived here since she was evacuated down here in the war, she could walk from Neville Estate to the bottom of town, and she bumped into people she knew all the time, everywhere. I think it's one community, and we've got to have this neighbourhood plan that's a vision for the whole town. Going back to your point about County Hall, I think you've got to look at County Hall and the Phoenix Quarter, both of them for housing. Knocking down County Hall will be one of the happiest days of my life because it's the ugliest building in Lewes. So I will be there for the demolition. So I think that's a great housing site.
All right.
Yeah, I'm Gregory Kent. I actually live in Falmer, but I spend most of my life here with my kids. I live my life in Lewes. So what I want to say is 3 key things I want to take out of this meeting, and I hope maybe other people will. The first one is the council owns 40% of this land, and it is therefore the developer itself. And I think we've had a very interesting discussion, but we've kind of gone a bit around the houses and slipped off that. The second point, I think I'm right in saying, is that Lewes Council actually is going to be the one that decides this. It's not the South Downs National Park Authority. It tends to rubber stamp decisions made by Lewes Council when they're within this area. If that's what it says on their website, and that's always been my understanding. The third point I wanted to really take away is the fact that they couldn't be bothered to come along tonight and represent their views and engage in compromise, negotiation. They just see themselves as having the political power, and we need to actually show them that we have the power as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm Kate Craig. I've lived in Lewes or Kingston since 1962. I think there may be an elephant in the room that we haven't addressed, and that is that the Lewes District Council is formed of most places outside Lewes, and Lewes is not well represented, and the political views of the people outside Lewes are very different, usually, from those in Lewes. So we here have a vision which is not shared by the Conservative Party in general, and I think that is very, very serious for us. What it means is that the council is only interested in making money. That's why it's a developer, and that's why it's in tune with the developer.
Okay.
What about, my question is,
question.
What about everybody in Lewes buying it?
Oh, right, okay.
Hi, I'm Joanna Carter, and I'm a district councillor for the Green Party. But the reason I stood as a district councillor, what actually really motivated me was coming back to Lewes a few years ago and seeing everything down on the Phoenix estate and how lively it was, and then realising that that was all under threat and that Lewes District Council owned 40% of it. And I thought the best thing to do was to try and get on the council and stop that from being destroyed. So I'd like to just say that not everyone on the council is thinking the same way, and that you can do something to help me stop the Santon and Lewes District Council development destroying all that's good on the Phoenix and Northreach estate. I've just put a petition up on change.org, and I'm going to make sure it's on the Lewes Phoenix Rising website, and it's going to say that it's to urge Lewes District Council to work with Phoenix Rising to get much better development down for North Street and Phoenix that actually keeps all those creative businesses.
Thank you for that. Can you just explain, you say you're a Green councillor on LDC, yes? What is the makeup of the people involved in planning?
Well,
politically?
The way the council works is there's 41 district councillors, 24 of whom are Conservative. Lewes Town doesn't vote Conservative, so Lewes Town has voted for Greens, for Liberal Democrats and for Independents. However, because Conservatives are the main political party, they get to choose the Cabinet. And the Cabinet is an entirely Conservative 6 or 7 councillors, and they get to make the final veto on all decisions. All right. So that's why Lewes Town doesn't get its voice heard.
Given the obvious democratic deficit and the outrageous gag on their own chairman, which is more like China than the UK, do you think the people here should go to the council and start attending their planning committee meetings, which in my experience are totally devoid of public scrutiny? Don't even have local newspaper reporters attend them. I think if you all turned up at committee, you might embarrass them into changing.
And Ruth, would that be? Would you endorse that as an idea?
I can inform you, without fear or favour, that Lewes District Council's planning meetings are available to all members of the public to attend, and any application that's up, you can have 3 people speaking for it and 3 against. They get 3 minutes each, which means 9 minutes of stuff either for or against. For example, in the past I have spoken both for and against things. I spoke very passionately for some solar panels in Grange Road on one occasion. And the debate is longer and better than it used to be because people used to get 2 minutes each.
I just want, before I do, to ask each member of the panel what they would say to the planning authorities as a result of what they've heard tonight.
Let's be very clear, the Planning Authority is the National Park Authority, and it will be the National Park Authority's Planning Committee which will take a decision on a major application like this. I think what I would say is, if there is a way in which they can defer this so as not to prejudice the will of the people of Lewes expressed through the neighbourhood plan, that would probably be the best solution.
Okay. Rafi.
With no expectation of being responded to in a positive way, 2 things. The first is a phrase I heard from the head of research and development at Philips many years ago. He said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably land up somewhere else. So let's have a sense of strategy which is joined up, which brings employment and residents together in a more sustainable way. Point number 1. Point number 2, modern industrial strategy, except in the UK, but widely accepted around the world, is no longer around pieces of paper and documents. It's around process. It's around the various stakeholders, the point made earlier on, working together to develop a common vision. And the problem always is to execute a vision. The vision is dead easy, right? It's the implementation. And unless you get your stakeholders involved in that process of vision development, you don't get effective execution. So my second plea to them is to work together with your stakeholders. Don't see them as enemies. There shouldn't be the separation we have in this room tonight between Lewes District Council and the populace, and see us walking on a common journey together, holding hands.
And Debbie.
I'd just like to say to them, why aren't you here? How can you be so arrogant?
And Paul?
I think I would just say that we as Lewes people care about our town passionately, more than I think most other places that I've ever lived. So I think we need to listen to that passion and embrace it, because I think it's a strength, a big strength.
Thank you. Andrew, briefly, if you would.
Well, with respect to the National Park, I'm delighted to say I don't want to have any more dialogue with them, because we're already having very good positive dialogue with the National Park as a planning authority, so we don't need to say any more to them. With respect to Lewes District Council, what I would say is what we've been saying throughout to Councillor Rob Blackman and his leadership colleagues and to Santon, their development partners, is please, please, please work with us. We've sought meeting after meeting. We've presented our proposals to them on a number of occasions, and they have continued to resist us. And I just want to, if I may, David, just something I read the other day that Gandhi said years ago. Gandhi said, when you're proposing ideas that people find difficult to accept, people in power find difficult to accept, you go through 4 stages. First of all, they will ignore you, and we've had that. Second of all, they will make fun of you. And some of us have been called mad and crazy, and this is a strange idea, and why are you doing it? We've had that. Third, they will get angry with you, and I think we're having that now in a sort of passive-aggressive sort of way by not dealing at all. And fourth, and this is what Gandhi says, fourth, you will win. And by winning, what I mean here is that winning would be to work together with Lewes District Council and their development partners, and that would be on the 49 sites as well as on the North Street site, so we can get the best of all worlds for our wonderful town and district.
Thank you, Andrew. And Ruth, when you go back to LDC, of which you are the chair, what will you say about what's happened here tonight to your colleagues?
Well, I am in my approved book here. It says the chair has a key role in acting as an ambassador, promoting the district council to the wider community, and it may take a number of forms. Now, as far as I understand it, an ambassador often goes off to a different country from the one they started from, and they go and find out about that country and represent the place they've come from there. It's a shame to always be called an ambassador, because it sounds as if the district council think that the populace are a foreign country, doesn't it? However, having visited that foreign country for many years now, I feel that as an ambassador, my duty will also be something that ambassadors always do, which is return to their home country and tell them what they found out while they were in the foreign country. And that's what I will be doing after tonight.
Well, thank you. That brings this meeting to an end. I've been asked just to remind you, if you want to, and you've heard it over and over again, if you want to influence what happens, do get involved in the neighbourhood plan. And apparently there is a bit of paper on all the chairs with details of an online questionnaire you can complete, and with the dates of events that are coming up. And you can also go to a website, which is www.Lewes for all for the details. The other thing, as I think was said at the beginning, this costs money to have an event like this. And yes, I can see you waving, but I don't think I'll be able to, even with 2 hands. Hold on a second. It does cost money. There are buckets at the doors. If you could make a small contribution to cover the cost of this, and anything over and above the cost of this meeting will go to the Lewes District Homelessness Charity, HomeLink. I'd just like to say to all of you, I do hope you found this meeting worth having despite the absences, but I would like to, on your behalf, thank the panellists very much indeed for the contribution they've made in trying to answer the questions and trying to throw some light on these extremely complex issues. So would you give them a warm round of applause? Thank you very much.